So, massive, sprawling server farms out in the middle of the desert.
Right, the ones the size of aircraft carriers.
Exactly. Just humming with electricity, pumping millions of gallons of water just to keep the processors cool while they basically digest the entire internet.
Yeah, that's pretty much the default image we all conjure up when we think about the artificial intelligence revolution.
It is. I mean, it's an industry that is entirely built on this premise of scale, right? Getting bigger, absorbing more data, centralizing all that power.
But what if the most disruptive move in tech right now isn't actually about getting bigger at all?
Right. What if the real revolution is about getting microscopic? Welcome to today's deep dive. We are grounding our conversation today in a really fascinating July 30, 2026 article.
From Tech Reader magazine.
Yeah, by Aaron Rose. It's titled How Apple's On-Device AI is Redefining Trust in the Age of AI. And, for you listening, the central mission of our deep dive today is to really explore how user privacy is being fundamentally engineered into physical hardware.
Right, rather than just being slapped onto a terms of service agreement as some kind of marketing slogan.
Exactly. We're looking at this radical shift in physical architecture and what that transition means, not just for, your personal texts and photos, but for the entire future of the global tech landscape.
Because the way data is handled is rapidly becoming the ultimate dividing line in the industry right now.
It really is. I mean, the AI revolution is moving at absolute lightning speed. Every day there is a new model, a new capability, some new startup promising to completely change your life.
Oh, absolutely.
But keeping the smartest technology strictly on the device, like literally the piece of glass sitting in your pocket right now, that might actually be the most disruptive move of the decade.
I completely agree. It flips the whole paradigm.
Think of it like this. Using traditional cloud-based AI is essentially like hiring a brilliant, highly capable personal assistant.
Sure.
They can do basically anything you ask, but there's a catch.
Always a catch.
Right. This assistant constantly gossips about your private life to their corporate bosses. They read your mail, they listen to your phone calls, and they take these meticulous notes just to send back to the home office.
And those corporate bosses are the massive tech conglomerates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are using the intimate details of your daily life to train the next iteration of that very same assistant.
Exactly.
They are aggregating your habits, your voice, your schedule, all of it into this centralized hive mind.
Right. But the alternative approach, this on-device architecture Apple is pushing, is like hiring an equally brilliant assistant.
Mm-hmm.
But this one lives inside a locked vault.
A very secure vault.
Yeah. They come to work, they help you sort your life out, but they physically cannot leave the vault, and they have no phone line to call the home office to gossip about what you just asked them to do.
And, to understand why building that vault is so technically demanding, we really have to establish the baseline of the modern internet.
Makes sense.
We have to look at what the rest of the tech industry considers quote-unquote normal when it comes to handling your data.
No.
Because the default assumption for the last, 15 years?
Easily 15 years.
Yeah, the assumption has been that your device is just a dumb terminal.
Yeah.
It's just a window that looks into the cloud, which is where all the real thinking actually happens.
Okay, let's unpack this because we have to start with the sheer scale of Apple's local promise here.
It's massive.
It is. Core AI models are now running directly on the device. And, these aren't just those small predictive text algorithms that guess your next word when you're texting.
Oh, no, we are talking about Prism ML.
Right, a 27 billion parameter model.
Which is just a staggering number.
It's wild, and it is running directly on the neural engine in devices like the iPhone 17 Pro, the iPad, the Vision Pro, and those new N50 smart glasses.
So let's break down why that number 27 billion parameters is, frankly, a structural miracle.
Please do, because it sounds impossible.
Well, in machine learning, a parameter is essentially a mathematical connection. It's very similar to a synapse in a human brain.
Okay.
So the more parameters you have, the more nuanced, capable, and, smart the AI is. Historically, running a model with 27 billion parameters required a whole rack of industrial GPUs pulling massive amounts of wattage in some huge server farm.
Right. Pumping all that water we talked about.
Exactly. So squeezing that level of cognitive power onto a sliver of silicon, the size of your fingernail, it requires completely rethinking the hardware from the ground up.
And that's where the neural engine comes in.
Yeah. Apple utilizes this dedicated piece of hardware, the neural engine, designed exclusively for the complex matrix math required by AI, and it operates completely independently from the main processor.
So when you, the user, ask your device to, say, summarize a text message or suggest a reply to a really sensitive medical email, or even just describe a photograph of your kid that you just took, all of that processing happens right there in your hand.
Right there on the device.
There is no upload to a server. There is no storage in a database. And I think critically, there is zero human review. Your personal conversations are not being used as raw fuel to train someone else's larger models.
But, and this is the big technical hurdle, right? The AI still needs to learn.
True.
So if the assistant never leaves the vault, how does it ever learn any new skills?
Right. How does it update?
This is accomplished through techniques called federated learning and differential privacy. Instead of uploading your raw photos or your exact text messages to a central server to teach the AI, the actual learning happens locally.
Okay, so it learns on my phone.
Yes, the AI on your phone studies your habits and learns, let's say, a new colloquial phrase you use a lot. Then it extracts only the mathematical weight adjustment, the lesson learned, if you will. And it just sends that tiny string of math to the cloud. Nothing else.
And differential privacy adds a layer of mathematical noise to that lesson, right?
Okay.
So even if someone intercepted that string of math, they couldn't reverse engineer it to figure out it came from you. It's basically like sending a summary of a grammar rule you learned rather than sending your actual personal diary to the central library.
That is a perfect analogy. It is a mathematical guarantee of privacy rather than a policy guarantee.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. A policy says, we promise not to look at your data. Mathematics says, it is physically impossible for us to look at your data.
Wow.
And this philosophy, it extends to the physical hardware itself. Take the N50 smart glasses, for example. There are physical indicator lights hardwired directly into the camera circuit.
Not just software toggles.
No, hardwired. When the camera receives power to capture data, the light turns on. It cannot be bypassed by software or a hack. You and everyone around you on the street know exactly when data is being captured.
Which brings us to the stark contrast with the cloud, because the rest of the industry is operating in a completely different reality.
Okay.
Let's look at that cloud trade-off. Take Google's Gemini. The default setting, which, let's be honest, is what the vast majority of people never bother to go in and change.
Because they bury in the menus.
Right. The default sends your voice recordings to the cloud the absolute second you activate it.
And the retention policies are this invisible mechanism most people just ignore entirely.
Yeah.
Those audio recordings can be stored on external servers for up to 12 months.
12 months, and subject to human review for up to 3 years.
It's incredible.
Think about the smart speaker sitting on your kitchen counter right now. You ask it, hey, what's the weather today? Or, how do I treat a fever? And that audio recording physically leaves your house.
Travels right out the door.
It travels through fiber optic cables, sits on a server farm for a year, and could potentially be listened to by a third-party contractor who is analyzing voice cadences 3 years from now.
It creates a massive hidden data trail. And the companies running these cloud models, they argue this massive aggregation of data is strictly necessary to improve the accuracy of the AI.
Sure, they need the data to make it better.
But it means the user is unknowingly generating a permanent, searchable record of their daily life. And it gets far more invasive when we look at ambient data collection.
Like what Meta is doing.
Yeah, exactly. Meta's approach with their Ray-Ban smart glasses.
Oh man, this is where things get genuinely wild. There is a massive March 2026 class action lawsuit against Meta regarding this exact issue.
Yeah, the Kenya lawsuit.
Right. The allegation in the lawsuit is that these glasses were capturing video footage in real time from public spaces, transmitting it over 5G to Meta's cloud, and then routing that raw footage to a third-party annotation firm located all the way in Kenya.
Remote workers on entirely different continents, allegedly clicking through real-time public video frames to label pedestrians, label cars, faces all, just to train Meta's computer vision models.
Unbelievable.
The core issue here is consent. The people walking down the street who end up in that video feed, they never opted in.
They had no idea.
There was no undeniable physical indicator light for them. Just raw, ambient data swept up into the cloud to feed the machine.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second. Let's play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
Isn't Google, or, even Meta to some extent, completely justified in hoarding this data?
How so?
Well, if the trade-off is giving up some privacy so the AI can actually learn, adapt, and become genuinely useful to humanity, Isn't that a sacrifice most users are willingly making every single day?
That's the argument, yeah.
I mean, when you ask Google for the weather or to summarize a really complex topic, you expect a flawless answer. And the only way the model gets flawless is by learning from millions and millions of real human interactions. Aren't users essentially just voting with their convenience?
It is the defining argument of the cloud-first era, and it definitely holds weight if you only look at utility.
Right.
But the friction comes from the fundamental lack of transparency. I mean, you might willingly trade your voice asking for a weather update in exchange for a better AI. But are you willing to trade a live video feed of your neighborhood? Are you willing to trade the audio of your child asking a smart speaker a sensitive question?
When you put it like that, no.
Cloud models do not discriminate. They learn from everyone. Your data becomes part of the collective hive mind. It's monetized and analyzed, often without any explicit granular consent.
It's the difference between an AI that adapts to you privately and an AI that absorbs you publicly. It forces a fundamental choice, you know? Do you want an assistant that knows everything about you or one that respects your boundaries?
But, and this is a big but,
Yeah.
there is a hard physical limit to that vault we talked about. Local AI sounds perfectly secure until you hit the wall of processing power.
Right, the hardware limit.
Your phone battery would drain in 3 minutes, and the silicon would practically melt in your hand if you asked it to render a 50-page legal summary or, like, generate a high-fidelity 3D video locally.
Right, so what happens when the request is just too big? I mean, the local neural engine on the iPhone 17 Pro is an engineering marvel, sure, but it is not a supercomputer.
No, it's not.
Does the privacy promise just completely break down the absolute second you need some heavy lifting done?
This is the intersection where Apple introduces private cloud compute.
Okay.
It is the architectural solution to this hybrid future because they recognize that you cannot run the entire world on a pocket-sized chip. So the device is programmed to seamlessly offload specific, heavy tasks to Apple's proprietary cloud servers.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine going to your local doctor, that's the on-device AI.
Okay, I like this.
They check you out in their small private practice. It's completely confidential, and they handle the minor issues locally. But suddenly they realize you need highly complex, specialized surgery.
Something they can't do in the office.
Exactly. The local office simply doesn't have the equipment. So they send you to a massive state-of-the-art hospital. But, and this is the private cloud compute mechanism, in this hospital, you are placed in a completely sealed, windowless, highly secure room. The specialist comes in, performs the incredibly complex surgery perfectly, and then the absolute second the surgery is over, the room is incinerated, and the specialist literally has their memory wiped so they completely forget you were ever there.
That's vivid, but it's incredibly accurate. And the mechanics of how that memory wipe works in reality are just fascinating.
How do they actually do it?
Private cloud compute environments utilize end-to-end encryption combined with verifiable hardware switches. The servers are physically designed down to the motherboard level so that even Apple employees with administrative access cannot look at the data while it is being processed.
Wait, really? Not even Apple?
Not even Apple. And independent security researchers can actually inspect the server software logs to mathematically verify that no backdoors exist.
So the data goes in, gets processed, and then what? It just vanishes.
Yes, it is an ephemeral processing space. Once the heavy lifting task like generating that complex image is completed and sent back to your phone, the data is instantly discarded from the server's RAM.
Poof. Gone.
Completely. It is never written to a hard drive. There is no retention, zero training data extracted for future models, and absolutely no lingering trace of your request.
This hybrid compromise feels incredibly vital, especially when you consider how essential these tools are becoming for everyday life. Like, there is a massive accessibility angle here that Aaron Rose brings up.
Oh, absolutely.
For users with reading or learning differences, AI tools aren't just fun party tricks for generating funny pictures.
No, they're essential.
Yeah, real-time summarization, advanced text-to-speech, contextual analysis of really dense documents. These are essential daily accessibility features for so many people.
And historically, the tech industry has actually penalized people for needing those features.
How so?
Well, if you required heavy processing power for accessibility in the past, you were essentially forced to surrender your personal data to the cloud. You had to pay for your accessibility with your privacy.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
It's true. But the hybrid model fundamentally shifts that dynamic. It delivers cloud-scale intelligence, but it defaults to local privacy.
Hmm.
It only reaches for that secure ephemeral cloud when it is mathematically necessary.
It's a philosophical choice that is literally embedded into the code. Trust first, power second. But this sealed room architecture doesn't just protect the individual user's private life.
Not at all.
This exact technical approach has unexpectedly solved some of the most massive international legal headaches on the planet.
Because personal privacy has rapidly mutated into a global geopolitical weapon. Data sovereignty is basically the new physical border.
Let's talk about China, for instance. Their data sovereignty laws are incredibly strict.
Very strict.
The government there mandates that all user data generated by citizens must be processed and physically stored locally on servers located strictly within China's borders.
Which, as you can imagine, is an absolute nightmare for traditional centralized cloud AI. If your massive language model relies on a global network of servers that are constantly pinging raw data back and forth to server farms in California or Virginia, you are in direct, flagrant violation of those data localization rules.
And what's the consequence of that?
We are seeing cloud-dependent models face heavy regulatory scrutiny, massive fines, and even outright bans in these sovereign regions because they fundamentally cannot stop the data from crossing borders.
But Apple secured approval for Apple Intelligence in China.
They did.
Because their core AI doesn't cross borders by default. Because that 27 billion parameter PrismL model is sitting right there on the actual iPhone hardware. They could mathematically prove to regulators that the personal data never leaves the physical device, let alone leaves the country.
And this compliance advantage extends directly to the European Union, too.
Oh, the EU AI Act.
Yes. In 2026, the EU's AI Act is in full enforcement. The EU is demanding extreme transparency and placing very, very strict limits on what they classify as high-risk AI systems.
Especially anything dealing with biometric data, right?
Right. Biometric data, facial recognition, or ambient data collection.
Which perfectly describes voice assistants constantly listening or smart glasses constantly looking.
Exactly. And the EU rules impose massive financial penalties, up to significant percentages of global turnover on companies that violate these boundaries.
That's a lot of money.
It is a massive hurdle for models relying on centralized data pools. But an architecture with no centralized data pool aligns naturally with the EU's demands.
Makes sense.
There is no uncontrolled access. The user has granular physical control. And consequently, Apple completely sidesteps the massive compliance costs and regulatory risks that are currently burying their primary competitors.
Okay, I have to ask you a strategic question here, because there is a massive pushback on this whole narrative of Apple as the great moral protector of user privacy.
Let's hear it.
Is this entire architecture actually just a brilliantly calculated Trojan horse? Do you think Apple really built this incredibly complex, highly expensive, local-first architecture solely for the moral high ground? Or did their executives look at the legislative map 5 years ago, see the tightening global data laws coming like a freight train, and design this specific physical architecture to completely dominate foreign markets where their competitors would be legally locked out?
Honestly, the reality is that the original intent, whether it was driven by pure corporate morality or ruthless market foresight, is ultimately irrelevant to the outcome.
You think so?
Yeah. The physical architecture is now the reality of the market. Privacy has successfully transitioned from a billboard advertisement into a concrete legal competitive advantage. Tech companies that cannot adapt their mass data collection models to run locally are quite literally finding themselves legally locked out of some of the largest consumer markets on the globe.
It turns out your data isn't just personal anymore. It is deeply political.
It is. The pressures of geopolitics, national security, and data sovereignty are forcing the hand of the tech industry in ways that consumer privacy advocacy alone never could have achieved. It's a structural forced hand.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's bring this right back down to the device sitting on your desk or in your hand right now.
Yeah, let's round it.
The AI revolution, beneath all the hype, the parameter counts, and the billionaire CEOs, is ultimately a silent calculation of trust.
That's exactly right. Every single time you ask a voice assistant for help, or use an AI to draft a sensitive email, or let it analyze a photo of your family, you are making a deliberate choice.
You are.
You are weighing the immediate convenience of the tool against the long-term exposure of your private life.
And for some people, convenience will absolutely always win out.
Definitely.
They want the smartest, fastest, most capable AI, and they frankly do not care if it's running on a server in another hemisphere that retains their data for 3 years.
And that's their choice.
But for others, especially those who rely on these tools for daily accessibility, or those who have just grown deeply fatigued by the constant surveillance economy of the modern internet trust, is the foundational requirement. Apple is making a massive multi-billion-dollar bet that you ultimately want an assistant that respects your boundaries over one that knows absolutely everything.
The ultimate test of artificial intelligence isn't going to be some synthetic performance benchmark.
No.
It isn't going to be about which multi-billion parameter model scores higher on a standardized medical or bar exam. The ultimate test for mass adoption is whether you, the user, actually feel safe letting it into the most intimate corners of your life.
Because if you don't feel safe, you won't use it.
Exactly. Technology, no matter how advanced or capable, is fundamentally useless if people are afraid to use it.
And building that safety, that privacy, directly into the physical silicon as a default, rather than an opt-in feature buried 6 menus deep in a settings app, it leaves us with a lot to think about as we watch this industry evolve.
It really does.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If this local first, privacy by default blueprint actually does become the overarching global legal standard.
Which it might.
Right. If China and the EU and eventually others force every tech company into this sealed room architecture, and our personal data is finally permanently locked away, where will the tech industry find the raw fuel to train the next generation of massive AI models?
That is the big question.
If the brilliant assistant is permanently locked in the vault and can never, ever share what it learns with the home office, how does the home office ever build a smarter assistant? It's a paradox the whole industry is going to have to answer sooner rather than later. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.